People rarely notice the smallest movement. But sometimes, a kingdom's greatest secret lasts only until the right person happens to look in the right direction. The morning after Alpha King Alexander Hayes was declared permanently paralyzed, Blackwood Castle had already begun to change. Not because the banners had been lowered, not because the great halls had fallen silent, but because hope itself seemed to have disappeared from the castle walls. Snow drifted gently across the stone courtyards, covering yesterday's footprints beneath a blanket of white. The towers that had once echoed with the confident voices of royal guards now stood wrapped in an uneasy silence. Servants moved quietly through narrow corridors with lowered heads, avoiding eye contact as though speaking too loudly might disturb the grief that hung over every room. Only one door remained guarded at every hour: the king's chamber. Inside that room, Alpha King Alexander Hayes had not spoken since the attack. Royal healers came and went throughout the night. Their verdict spread quickly through the kingdom. His spine had been badly injured. He would never walk again. Some servants cried. Others whispered prayers beneath their breath. Several nobles had already begun discussing what the kingdom might become without the strong Alpha King who had ruled for nearly 2 decades. Emily Foster heard every rumor. She believed none of them completely. At 24 years old, Emily had worked as a maid inside Blackwood Castle for almost 4 years. She had polished the same marble floors, changed the same bed linens, and lit the same fireplaces every morning long before sunrise. Most nobles never remembered her name. Many barely noticed her existence. Emily preferred it that way. Invisible people often notice things everyone else overlooked. She adjusted the basket resting against her hip as she climbed the final staircase leading toward the royal chambers. Fresh towels, clean linen, a small vase of winter roses gathered from the castle greenhouse. Nothing more. The guards outside the king's chamber recognized her immediately. "Morning, Emily." She smiled politely. "Good morning." One of them slowly opened the heavy oak door. "He's still asleep." She nodded quietly before stepping inside. Warm firelight flickered across stone walls decorated with faded battle banners. Thick curtains remained partially drawn, allowing only a narrow beam of pale winter sunlight to reach the enormous bed standing in the center of the room. Alexander Hayes lay perfectly still beneath layers of dark wool blankets. His broad shoulders no longer carried polished armor. His powerful hands rested motionless beside him. His eyes remained closed. Without the fierce confidence that usually surrounded him, he looked strangely human, almost fragile. Emily quietly placed the fresh flowers beside the window before beginning her routine. She folded yesterday's blankets, collected empty medicine bottles, replaced melted candles. Everything exactly as she had done countless times before. Silence filled the room. Only the soft crackling of burning logs disturbed the stillness. As Emily reached down beside the bed, one corner of a folded hand towel slipped from her basket and fell onto the wooden floor. It landed just beneath the edge of the king's bed. She knelt immediately. "I'm sorry." The apology escaped her automatically, though no one had spoken. She reached beneath the bed to retrieve the towel. When she looked up, she froze. For the briefest moment, no longer than a heartbeat. She saw the index finger of Alexander Hayes' right hand curl inward. Not much, barely enough to notice. Then, it became perfectly still again. Emily remained kneeling on the floor, the folded towel forgotten in her hand. The healers had all sworn the Alpha King could no longer move. Every guard believed it. Every noble believed it. The entire kingdom believed it. Yet Emily had just watched a motion that should have been impossible. She slowly stood without making a sound. Her eyes never left the king's hand. It rested exactly where it had before. Silent. Motionless. As though nothing had happened. But somewhere deep inside her, a quiet certainty had already begun to grow. Either every healer in Blackwood Castle had made an impossible mistake, or the Alpha King was hiding a secret that no one else had managed to see. A castle does not change the moment a king falls. It changes the moment people believe he will never rise again. By the second morning, Blackwood Castle had already begun forgetting the man who still lay inside its highest chamber. Not openly, not cruelly, quietly, almost politely. Emily Foster noticed it before anyone else. She carried a basket of fresh linen through the eastern corridor as servants whispered behind half-closed doors. "The council meets today. I heard Lady Sophia will preside." The Alpha King can no longer sign decrees. They'll have no choice. Emily continued walking without slowing her pace. Rumors spread quickly inside castles. Truth usually moved much more slowly. When she reached the royal chamber, the guards opened the heavy oak doors without a word. You know the routine. Emily smiled faintly. I do. The room remained exactly as she had left it yesterday. The fire burned steadily. Fresh medicine rested beside the bed. Heavy winter curtains softened the pale morning light. Alexander Hayes lay motionless beneath dark blankets, his breathing slow and even. Anyone entering the room would have believed the royal healers without hesitation. Emily almost did. Almost. She quietly replaced the wilted winter roses with fresh white lilies. She collected empty bowls. She swept away ashes near the fireplace. Every movement remained calm, natural, unhurried, yet her eyes never stopped observing. Yesterday, she had seen his finger move. Today, she intended to watch everything. As she lifted a leather-bound history book from the bedside table to dust beneath it, something caught her attention. She frowned. The book now rested slightly closer to the edge than it had yesterday. Only an inch, perhaps less. Emily paused. She remembered its exact position because she always aligned the corner perfectly with the carved edge of the table. She quietly returned it to its original place. Coincidence? Maybe. She continued cleaning. A silver goblet still stood beside the bed. The water level had dropped slightly. Emily looked toward the untouched medicine. None of the healers had entered since dawn. The guards would have announced them. She looked back at Alexander. His eyes remained closed. His chest rose and fell steadily. Nothing else. She said nothing. Instead, she opened the window just enough to allow fresh winter air inside. Cold wind drifted across the room. The fire crackled louder. A curtain lifted gently. Emily pretended to arrange the flowers while watching the polished silver mirror hanging opposite the bed. The reflection allowed her to see Alexander without facing him directly. Minutes passed. Nothing. She almost convinced herself she had imagined everything. Then, a faint gust pushed the curtain farther inward. The loose corner brushed against Alexander's face. For a single heartbeat, his jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Then it relaxed once more. Emily slowly lowered the vase into place. No paralyzed man reacted with such precise control. Not like that. Not twice. A quiet knock interrupted the silence. Lady Sophia Bennet entered without waiting for permission. Tall, elegant, wrapped in an expensive midnight blue cloak trimmed with white fur. Two noblewomen followed several steps behind. Sophia approached the bedside with graceful confidence. Oh, Alexander. She sighed softly. We'll take good care of everything. She reached down and gently touched his hand. Her expression appeared filled with sorrow. Emily watched carefully. Something about the performance felt rehearsed. Too perfect. Sophia never looked at Alexander's face. Only toward the two noble women watching her. Long enough for them to witness her devotion. Then she released his hand. We should let him rest. The women nodded sympathetically before leaving together. Their footsteps faded down the corridor. Silence returned. Emily remained standing beside the fireplace. She looked toward the bed once more. This time, Alexander's hand rested in a slightly different position than it had only moments before. Not much, barely enough for anyone else to notice. But Emily noticed. Because unlike everyone else in Blackwood Castle, she had stopped watching the tragedy. She had started watching the man. And the more carefully she observed, the less she believed the Alpha King was truly paralyzed at all. The eyes often accept what they expect to see. The heart notices what the eyes quietly ignore. Emily Foster did not return to the king's chamber that afternoon because she doubted herself. She returned because she trusted what she had seen. The castle continued preparing for another meeting of the royal council. Servants rushed through the corridors carrying ledgers, documents, and trays of refreshments for the nobles who now spent more time discussing succession than recovery. Emily listened without appearing to listen. Lady Sophia handled the council perfectly. The Alpha King may never rule again. Perhaps it's time the kingdom looked forward. Every sentence made her stomach tighten. Alexander Hayes was still alive. Yet people had already begun speaking of him as though he belonged to history. She quietly climbed the familiar staircase once more. The two guards outside the royal chamber exchanged tired smiles. Back again, Emily lifted the folded towels in her basket. Fresh linens. One guard opened the door. He hasn't moved all day. Emily nodded. So everyone says. The chamber remained silent. The afternoon sun stretched across the wooden floor, casting long shadows beneath the furniture. Alexander lay exactly as before, eyes closed, hands resting calmly. Not a single muscle appeared to move. Emily began replacing the bed linens with practiced precision. She worked slowly, not because the task required it, because observation did. She noticed the heavy wolf fur cloak hanging beside the fireplace. Yesterday, it had faced inward. Today, the clasp pointed toward the door. Someone had touched it. She looked toward the king's bed. Still nothing. Next, she gathered the breakfast tray left by the healers. The bread remained untouched. The medicine untouched. But the cup of tea, its surface carried the faint stain left behind after someone had taken a careful sip. Emily frowned. The tray had been delivered after sunrise. The guards never reported anyone entering afterward. She gently lifted the porcelain cup. It was empty. Not completely. Only enough to suggest someone had drunk from it after everyone else believed the room was sealed. Her heartbeat quickened. She walked toward the window. Outside, snowflakes drifted silently through the castle gardens. Several royal guards practiced sword drills below. Emily pretended to admire the snowfall while secretly studying the polished reflection in the glass. Alexander remained motionless. Minutes passed. Then, a loud shout echoed from the training yard. One young guard lost his footing and struck another's shield with tremendous force. The sharp metallic crash rang through the open window. Without thinking, Alexander's eyelids tightened. Not fully, only the smallest instinctive reaction, the kind every experienced warrior developed after surviving years of battle. Emily slowly looked down. His breathing remained steady. His face relaxed once again. But she had seen enough. No unconscious man reacted with battlefield reflexes. Someone was hiding behind perfect stillness. As she carefully folded another blanket, a folded map slipped from beneath the edge of the mattress. Only one corner appeared before sliding back into place. Emily froze. Yesterday there had been no map. She knew because she had changed every sheet herself. Someone had hidden it afterward. Or someone had used it. She deliberately ignored it. Instead, she finished making the bed exactly as always. When she reached the doorway, she paused. Without turning around, she spoke softly enough that only one person inside the room could possibly hear. "I don't know why you're pretending." Silence answered. Emily rested one hand against the wooden door. "But I know you're not truly paralyzed." She waited. One heartbeat. 2. 3. Nothing. She quietly stepped into the corridor and allowed the heavy door to close behind her. Inside the chamber, the silence lasted several more seconds. Then, for the first time since the supposed attack, Alexander Hayes slowly opened his eyes. He stared at the closed door with an expression no healer, noble, or guard had managed to awaken. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. The maid had seen through everything, much sooner than he had expected. The hardest secret to keep is the one already discovered by the only person you never expected to notice. Emily slept very little that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the Alpha King's faint smile after she had spoken those impossible words. "You aren't truly paralyzed." She had received no answer, no confession, yet silence itself had become an answer. By sunrise, the castle buzzed with unusual activity. Lady Sophia Bennet had summoned another meeting of the Royal Council. Servants rushed through the corridors carrying sealed letters and silver trays. Nobles greeted one another with polite smiles while quietly discussing new appointments and future policies. It was as though the kingdom had already accepted that Alexander Hayes would never rule again. Emily carried fresh towels toward the royal chamber as she did every morning. The guards greeted her. "Good morning." She smiled. "Good morning." When she entered the room, everything appeared unchanged. The fire burned steadily. The curtains remained half closed. Alexander lay exactly as before, perfectly still. If Emily had not witnessed everything herself, she might have doubted her own memory. She quietly replaced the flowers, folded clean blankets, refilled the water pitcher. Neither of them spoke. Not until she reached the door. "I won't tell anyone." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I don't know why you're doing this." She rested her hand on the door handle. "But whatever your reason." She hesitated. "I hope it's worth the people who have already started betraying you." Silence. Emily gently opened the door, Close it. The voice was calm, deep, completely steady. Emily froze. Very slowly, she turned around. Alexander Hayes was no longer lying with his eyes closed. He was watching her, fully awake. His piercing blue eyes held neither panic nor anger, only quiet curiosity. Emily carefully closed the heavy oak door once more. Neither moved for several long seconds. Finally, Alexander spoke. "When did you know?" Emily answered honestly. "Yesterday." "My finger." She nodded. "And the book, the tea, the cloak, the map, the way you reacted to the sound outside." Alexander's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise. Respect. "You noticed all of that?" Emily smiled faintly. "I clean this room every day. When something changes, I notice." A quiet laugh escaped him. The first genuine laugh he had allowed himself since the attack. "You've embarrassed every healer in my kingdom." Emily lowered her eyes. "I wasn't trying to." Alexander slowly sat upright on the edge of the bed. His movements were careful but completely controlled. Strong. There was no sign of paralysis. Only the stiffness of a man who had remained in bed for days. Emily watched without speaking. Seeing him stand would have been astonishing. Watching him simply sit upright already answered every question she had carried. Alexander studied her carefully. "You aren't frightened." Emily thought for a moment. "I was. And now, I think you're testing someone." Alexander remained silent. Then he stood, tall, broad-shouldered, every bit the warrior the kingdom believed it had lost. He walked slowly toward the fireplace, not because he needed support, because he wanted to stretch muscles left unused for days. Emily quietly watched him. "You've told no one." "No. You won't." "No." "Why?" She looked directly at him. "Because if a king believes pretending to be helpless is safer than telling the truth, then something much more dangerous is happening inside this castle." Alexander stopped walking. For the first time since the plan had begun, someone understood its purpose without explanation. He looked into the fire for several moments before speaking again. "I never pretended because of my enemies." Emily waited. "I pretended because I wanted to discover who they truly were." Outside the chamber, footsteps echoed through the corridor. Lady Sophia's voice approached. Alexander immediately returned to the bed. Within seconds, he lay perfectly motionless once again. Emily adjusted the blanket with flawless precision. Just as the chamber doors slowly opened, Lady Sophia entered wearing a sympathetic smile. She never noticed that, only moments before, the Alpha King she believed broken had been standing only a few steps away. Nor did she realize the quiet maid beside the bed had just become the only living person entrusted with the king's greatest secret. A lie can reveal more truth than honesty, if the right people believe it long enough. After Lady Sophia left the royal chamber, silence settled once again over the room. Emily remained beside the fireplace, pretending to straighten a stack of folded blankets while Alexander lay motionless beneath the covers. Only when the distant footsteps faded completely did he open his eyes. "You saw her?" Emily nodded. "I saw enough." Alexander slowly sat upright once more. "The performance becomes more convincing every day." "It does," Emily admitted. "Too convincing." He studied her expression. "You think I've waited too long?" Emily hesitated. "I think the people around you are becoming bolder." Alexander walked toward the narrow window overlooking the castle courtyard. Below, servants unloaded supply wagons, while several noble carriages entered through the front gate. "They already believe they've won," Emily said quietly. Alexander folded his arms. "That's exactly what I wanted." Emily looked at him. "But how many innocent people must believe you've fallen before the guilty finally reveal themselves?" The question lingered between them. For the first time since beginning his deception, Alexander found himself without an immediate answer. He had planned every detail of the false paralysis. The healers had been sworn to secrecy. Only his oldest captain had known the truth before leaving the castle to investigate the ambush that had supposedly crippled him. Everyone else, including Lady Sophia, had believed the lie. Until Emily. "You remind me of someone," Alexander said at last. "My mother." Emily looked surprised. She used to ask difficult questions too. A faint smile crossed his face before quickly disappearing. A sharp knock interrupted them. 3 slow knocks. Then 2 more. Alexander's expression hardened instantly. Back to the bed. Without hesitation, he returned beneath the blankets. Within seconds, his breathing slowed. His eyes closed. His body became perfectly still. Emily had barely finished arranging the pillows when the chamber doors opened. Lord Victor Langley entered, one of the kingdom's wealthiest nobles. Behind him stood Lady Sophia. "My king," Victor said loudly, though everyone knew Alexander would supposedly never answer. "I've brought documents requiring your royal seal." Sophia sighed dramatically. "It breaks my heart that he cannot even lift a hand." Emily lowered her gaze while quietly pouring fresh tea. She watched their reflections in the polished silver tray. Victor approached the bedside. Instead of looking at Alexander's face, his eyes drifted toward the royal signet ring. Only for a moment, but Emily noticed. Then Victor exchanged the briefest glance with Sophia, a glance lasting less than a second, one that said far more than words ever could. Sophia smiled gently. "I suppose we'll safeguard the royal seal until His Majesty recovers." Victor nodded. "A necessary responsibility." Alexander never moved. Emily continued pouring tea. Neither noble realized she had witnessed the silent exchange. After several minutes, they finally departed. The heavy doors closed. Alexander opened his eyes immediately. "You noticed?" Emily answered before he could finish the sentence. "They weren't looking at you." Alexander nodded. "They were looking at your authority." Emily placed the untouched teacup onto the table. Lady Sophia wasn't mourning. No, she was making sure everyone watched her mourn. Alexander's eyes narrowed. "And Lord Victor? He wants the ring." Silence filled the room again. Everything Emily had observed matched reports his hidden investigators had already begun sending from beyond the castle walls. Yet hearing the same conclusions from a maid with no political training unsettled him more than any written report. "You understand people remarkably well." Emily smiled sadly. "No, Your Majesty." She looked toward the closed doors. "I understand what people become when they believe no one is watching." Alexander slowly stood once again. This time he walked directly to the table where maps, coded reports, and sealed letters lay hidden beneath a false wooden panel. He lifted the compartment and revealed dozens of documents. "The trap is almost ready." Emily stared at the evidence. Names, transactions, secret correspondence, hidden alliances. The false paralysis had never been about testing his own strength. It had been about giving betrayal enough time to reveal its true face. And now, with Emily quietly seeing everything the others overlooked, the final stage of the king's plan could finally begin. The moment people stop pretending is rarely the moment they realize they have already exposed themselves. The following morning, Blackwood Castle felt different. Not because anything had changed, because Emily now knew exactly what she was looking for. Alexander's hidden compartment remained sealed beneath the writing table after she left the chamber. The maps, coded letters, and lists of suspicious names disappeared beneath the false wooden panel once more. Before lying back on the bed, Alexander spoke only one sentence. "Watch them." Emily had simply nodded. She needed no further explanation. As she carried empty trays through the castle corridors, the palace unfolded before her with entirely new meaning. Conversations she once dismissed as idle gossip suddenly sounded calculated. Friendly smiles looked rehearsed. Every glance seemed to hide another purpose. Near the council chamber, she paused outside an open doorway while polishing a silver pitcher. Inside, Lord Victor Langley spoke quietly with two lesser nobles. "The treasury cannot remain frozen forever. The king cannot sign. He cannot even hold a pen." One noble lowered his voice. "And Lady Sophia?" Victor smiled. "She understands what must happen." Emily continued walking before anyone noticed her standing there. An hour later, while arranging fresh flowers in the eastern gallery, she watched Lady Sophia speaking with the captain of the palace servants. "I want the king's household reduced." The captain hesitated. "Reduced, my lady? There is no need for so many attendants anymore." Her tone remained gentle, almost compassionate. "Half the staff may be reassigned." Emily's hands tightened around the flower vase. Fewer servants, fewer witnesses, fewer loyal eyes near the king's chamber. It sounded practical. It also sounded deliberate. That afternoon she returned with fresh tea. Alexander remained perfectly still until the doors closed behind her. "They're removing people." "I expected that." Emily poured tea before continuing. "They're not waiting for your death." Alexander looked at her carefully. "They're preparing for your absence." He accepted the cup without speaking. Emily then described everything she had overheard. Victor's discussion, Sophia's order, The reduction of the royal household. Alexander listened silently. When she finished, he walked toward the hidden compartment once more. From inside, he removed a folded parchment. Several names had already been crossed out. Others remained. He added another mark beside Victor Langley's name, then another beside Sophia Bennett. They've moved sooner than expected. Emily looked at the growing list. How many people are involved? I don't know. You will. Alexander folded the parchment carefully. Every greedy person believes they deserve one more ally. A knock interrupted them. 3 rapid taps. 1 pause. Then another. Alexander frowned. That isn't one of my guards. He returned to bed instantly. Emily resumed adjusting the blankets. The door opened. A young servant entered carrying fresh medicine. Emily recognized him immediately. Thomas, one of the kitchen assistants. Usually cheerful. Today he refused to meet her eyes. I brought the afternoon medicine. His hands trembled slightly as he placed the tray beside the bed. Emily noticed something immediately. The bottle was different. Yesterday's medicine had been sealed with blue wax. Today's carried black wax. Thomas hurried toward the door. Emily stopped him. Thomas. He froze. Who gave you that bottle? He swallowed. The royal pharmacy. Emily stepped closer. No. Thomas's face turned pale. I was told not to ask questions. By whom? Before he could answer, hurried footsteps echoed outside the chamber. Thomas's eyes widened with fear. I have to go. He rushed from the room. Emily immediately picked up the bottle. Alexander sat upright. Without removing the wax seal, he smelled it carefully. His expression darkened. This isn't medicine. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. What is it? I don't know yet. He carefully wrapped the bottle inside a cloth instead of opening it. If someone wanted me dead. He looked toward the closed door through which Thomas had fled. They've just become impatient. For the first time since beginning the deception, the danger was no longer political. Someone had made the decision to end the game completely. And whoever had sent that bottle believed the Alpha King would never notice the difference between healing and poison. The first mistake betrays intention. The second mistake reveals desperation. Thomas disappeared before sunset. Emily searched the servants' quarters after finishing her duties, asking quietly whether anyone had seen the young kitchen assistant. Every answer was the same. He was here this morning. I thought he was assigned to the royal wing. No one has seen him since. By evening, his small room had already been emptied. His blanket was gone. His spare boots were missing. Even the wooden carving of a wolf he kept beside his bed had vanished. Someone had erased him with unsettling efficiency. Emily returned to the king's chamber, carrying only a lantern. Alexander was waiting. You were gone longer than usual. Thomas has disappeared. Alexander's expression hardened. So soon. I don't think he ran. Neither do I. Emily placed the lantern beside the hidden compartment. He looked frightened. He was. Alexander unfolded another coded report. My captain sent word this afternoon. He pointed towards several names written across the parchment. 3 witnesses connected to the ambush disappeared during the past month. Emily slowly looked up. Now Thomas. Alexander nodded. They're cleaning every loose thread. Silence settled between them. The poison bottle remained untouched inside a locked wooden chest. Neither intended to risk opening it until Alexander's trusted healer returned secretly to the castle. Emily walked toward the window. Below, torchlight illuminated the courtyard where nobles gathered for an evening banquet hosted by Lady Sophia. Music floated upward through the cold night air. Laughter echoed across the stone walls. They're celebrating. Alexander joined her at the window. They believe the kingdom already belongs to them. Emily watched Sophia greeting guests with effortless elegance. Every smile appeared flawless. Every gesture perfectly measured. Then she noticed something unusual. Lord Victor handed Sophia a folded piece of parchment. Sophia did not open it. She simply slipped it inside her sleeve. Moments later, another noble approached. Sophia excused herself and disappeared into the western garden alone. Emily frowned. She left the banquet. Alexander immediately turned. Which way? The western garden. He looked toward the hidden passage concealed behind the fireplace. I've used that tunnel before. Emily looked at him. You're going? I need to know who she's meeting. You can't. Alexander paused. If someone sees you walking, the entire plan ends tonight. He knew she was right. Every instinct told him to act. Every calculation demanded patience. Emily spoke carefully. Let me go. Alexander looked at her in disbelief. If they see a maid walking through the gardens, they'll think she's carrying towels. If they see their crippled king. She did not finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Minutes later, Emily stepped into the moonlit garden carrying an empty laundry basket. The cold air bit at her cheeks. She walked slowly between tall hedges until distant voices reached her ears. Sophia stood beside the old stone fountain. Across from her waited a hooded man. Emily remained hidden behind an ivy-covered wall. "I've delivered the medicine," Sophia whispered. "And he never drank it." The hooded man remained silent. Sophia's voice sharpened. "Someone inside that room is interfering." Emily's heartbeat quickened. "Someone. Not the king. Someone else." The hooded man finally spoke. "Then remove whoever is protecting him." Sophia's answer came without hesitation. "I already have someone watching the servants." Emily's fingers tightened around the basket handle. A branch shifted beneath her foot. The faint crack echoed through the garden. Both figures turned instantly. "Who's there?" Emily did not hesitate. She stepped from the shadows carrying the basket naturally against her hip. "My lady." Sophia stared at her. "Emily." Emily lowered her head respectfully. "I was collecting linens before tomorrow's washing." Sophia smiled. "Warm. Kind. Completely false." Of course. The hooded man had already disappeared into the darkness. Emily curtsied politely before walking away without rushing. Only after reaching the castle doors did she finally allow herself to breathe. She had escaped unnoticed. Or so she believed. High above the garden, hidden inside the bell tower, another pair of eyes quietly followed her every step. Someone else now knew the maid had begun seeing far more than she ever should. The most dangerous hunters are the ones who believe their prey has nowhere left to run. Emily barely slept after returning from the garden. Lady Sophia's words echoed through her mind. "Remove whoever is protecting him." She had not imagined them. She had heard every syllable, which meant one terrifying truth. Someone inside Blackwood Castle already suspected there was another person standing between the conspirators and the helpless king. Just before dawn, Emily entered Alexander's chamber through the servant's entrance. She locked the door behind her. Alexander was already awake. One look at her face told him everything. "You heard something." Emily nodded. "They know someone is interfering." Alexander remained silent. She repeated every word exchanged beside the fountain. Sophia's report. The poison medicine. The order to remove whoever was protecting the king. When she finished, Alexander walked slowly toward the fireplace. His expression had changed. Not with fear. With certainty. "The trap has entered its final stage." Emily frowned. "They'll come after you." "No." He looked directly into her eyes. "They'll come after you first." Silence filled the room. Alexander opened another hidden compartment beneath the stone hearth. Inside lay a small wooden box, unlike the others. He removed it carefully. "You've earned the truth." Emily watched as he opened the lid. Inside rested an old silver wolf crest attached to a worn leather cord. The edges had been polished smooth by years of use. Alexander handed it to her. "You've seen this before." Emily stared at it. Then her eyes widened. "I have." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "When I was 12, fragments of memory flooded back. A winter storm. A frozen mountain road. A broken carriage trapped beneath fallen trees. A wounded traveler whose face she never clearly saw. She had hidden him inside an abandoned shepherd's cabin while riders searched nearby. Before leaving, the injured stranger had pressed the silver crest into her hands. He told her, 'If anyone ever asks where this came from, say you found it.'" Emily looked at Alexander. "It was you." Alexander nodded slowly. "I lost that crest the night you saved my life." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You remembered me?" "I remembered the only person who helped a stranger without asking his name." He smiled faintly. "When I saw you working here months ago, I recognized your eyes." Emily lowered her gaze. "You never said anything." "I wanted to." His voice softened. "But I needed to know whether the kindness I remembered still existed." She looked back at him. "And now, you proved it." Not because she recognized him. Not because she expected reward. But because she had risked herself once again without knowing whether anyone would ever believe her. A sudden knock shattered the quiet. 3 heavy strikes. Neither of Alexander's trusted guards used that pattern. Alexander immediately returned to bed. Emily hid the silver crest beneath her apron. The chamber doors swung open. Lady Sophia entered with 4 palace guards. Her expression remained perfectly composed. Emily Foster. Yes, my lady. Sophia smiled politely. There have been accusations. Emily felt her pulse quicken. What accusations? A servant reported seeing you wandering the western gardens during restricted hours. Emily answered calmly. I was collecting laundry. Sophia's smile never faded. How unfortunate. She nodded toward the guards. Search her room. Alexander lay motionless with closed eyes. Inside, every instinct demanded he rise immediately. Instead, he remained perfectly still. The trap required patience. Even now, the guards bowed and left at once. Sophia turned back toward Emily. I do hope they find nothing suspicious. Then she gently adjusted the blanket covering the supposedly helpless king. So many loyal servants become confused during difficult times. She left as gracefully as she had entered. The chamber doors closed. Emily slowly released the breath she had been holding. Alexander opened his eyes. They've made their choice. Emily nodded. They're no longer testing me. She looked toward the corridor where the guards had disappeared. They've started hunting me. The truth does not become powerful when it is discovered. It becomes powerful when those who buried it are forced to face it together. The search began before sunrise. Blackwood Castle awoke to the sound of boots echoing through every corridor. Servants opened doors one after another as palace guards carried out Lady Sophia's orders. Every trunk, every cabinet, every servant's room. Nothing would remain unchecked. Emily stood quietly beside her small bed while 2 guards searched the modest chamber she had occupied for 4 years. A wooden chair, a narrow bookshelf, 2 neatly folded dresses. Nothing more. One guard opened the small chest beneath her window. Inside lay only sewing needles, spare aprons, and several worn books. The second guard looked disappointed. Nothing. Emily remained calm. Because the silver wolf crest no longer rested there. The moment Sophia had left the king's chamber yesterday, Alexander had hidden it beneath a loose stone inside the old chapel where no search party would ever think to look. The guards finally stepped outside. We're finished. Emily nodded politely. Thank you. As they disappeared down the hallway, another servant hurried toward her. It was Margaret, the elderly laundry mistress. They're searching everyone. Emily answered quietly. I know. Margaret lowered her voice. They arrested Thomas. Emily froze. When? Before dawn. They're saying he confessed. Emily's heart sank. She knew immediately. A frightened servant could be forced to confess almost anything. Inside the king's chamber, Alexander listened without interrupting as Emily repeated everything. They found Thomas. Alexander slowly closed his eyes. They'll make him testify. Against who? Against whoever they need. Silence filled the room. Emily finally asked the question she had been carrying for days. When will this end? Alexander walked toward the window. When they believe they've already won. As if summoned by those very words, the great cathedral bells suddenly rang across the castle. 1, 2, 3. Then a royal messenger's voice echoed through every courtyard. By order of Lady Sophia Bennet, the royal council will assemble before sunset. Attendance is mandatory. Alexander remained perfectly still. So, he spoke quietly. They're ready. Emily looked toward him. They're moving today. They intend to. He crossed to the hidden compartment beneath the writing desk. Instead of removing reports, he lifted a leather folder sealed with the royal crest. Emily had never seen it before. What is it? My insurance. He handed it to her. Inside were signed confessions, secret ledgers, letters bearing noble seals, records of missing treasury funds, witness statements collected months before the assassination attempt. Emily looked up in astonishment. You already knew. I suspected. You were gathering proof long before the attack. Alexander nodded. The false paralysis simply convinced the guilty to finish writing the rest of the evidence themselves. Another knock came. This time it was the agreed signal. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. Alexander opened the hidden passage. Captain Rowan Mercer emerged from the darkness, covered in road dust. He bowed once. My king, you've returned. Rowan removed a leather satchel from his shoulder. I found the final witness. Emily watched as he placed several sealed documents onto the table. The merchant survived. He identified the man who paid for the ambush. Alexander broke the wax seal. His eyes scanned the page only briefly. Then he handed it to Emily. At the bottom stood one unmistakable signature. Lord Victor Langley. Emily slowly looked up. It was him. Alexander nodded. And Lady Sophia financed it. Captain Rowan added quietly. We arrested the courier carrying their correspondence this morning. The room fell silent. Months of deception. Weeks of patience. Countless small observations. Everything had finally joined together. Alexander folded every document into the leather folder before fastening the royal seal. This ends tonight. Emily looked toward the bed where he had pretended to lie helpless for days. You'll reveal the truth. Alexander's expression remained calm. No. He looked directly into her eyes. I'll let them reveal themselves first. Outside, the great bells continued echoing across Blackwood Castle, calling every noble toward the council chamber. None of them realized they were walking into a meeting they believed would secure their future. Instead, they were walking into the final act of the Alpha King's carefully planned test. Every conspiracy believes it controls the room, until the person it ignored decides to speak. The Royal Council assembled just before sunset. Blackwood Castle's grand chamber had not been this crowded in years. Nobles filled the polished oak benches. Military commanders stood along the walls. Senior healers, judges, merchants, and regional lords waited beneath towering stained-glass windows as the great bronze doors slowly closed. At the center of the hall stood the Alpha King's empty throne. Beside it rested the wheeled chair prepared for the ruler everyone believed could no longer walk. Emily remained near the rear entrance with the other servants. Her plain gray uniform blended into the crowd, exactly as it always had. Lady Sophia entered first. Dressed in deep royal blue trimmed with silver embroidery, she carried herself with perfect confidence. Lord Victor Langley walked beside her. Neither smiled openly. They did not need to. Their calm expressions suggested people already certain of victory. The royal herald struck his staff against the marble floor. His Majesty, King Alexander Hayes. The chamber fell silent. For guards slowly pushed Alexander's chair into the hall. He sat exactly as expected, motionless, expressionless. His hands rested across a heavy blanket. Every eye followed him. Emily noticed something different. Not about Alexander. About everyone else. No one looked at the king with hope anymore. They looked at him as though he had already become history. Lady Sophia stepped gracefully toward the center. My fellow council members. Her voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. Our beloved king continues his courageous struggle. Several nobles bowed their heads respectfully. While His Majesty recovers, difficult decisions cannot wait. Lord Victor stepped forward carrying a leather folder. The treasury requires temporary authority. The military requires signatures. The provinces await leadership. Everything sounded reasonable, measured, responsible. Emily watched faces around the room. Many nobles nodded in agreement. Others remained uncertain. Sophia continued. For the good of the kingdom, I humbly accept temporary stewardship until His Majesty regains his strength. The words had barely left her lips before several supporters applauded. Not loudly, just enough to encourage the rest. Alexander never moved. Emily quietly looked toward Captain Rowan standing among the palace guards. Their eyes met briefly. He gave the smallest possible nod. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Sophia accepted the leather folder from Victor. Inside rested prepared decrees already bearing the seals of several influential nobles. Only the royal seal remained missing. Victor approached Alexander's chair. Your Majesty. His voice sounded almost sympathetic. If you can hear us, place your hand upon the seal. He reached toward Alexander's motionless hand. Emily's pulse quickened. Not because she feared Alexander, because this was the moment the conspirators would expose themselves completely. Victor gently lifted the king's hand. It remained limp, exactly as expected. He glanced toward Sophia. She gave the faintest nod. Victor slowly removed the royal signet ring from Alexander's finger. No one objected. Several nobles even looked relieved. Emily watched the entire hall. This, not the poison, not the false medicine, not the secret meetings. This was the true theft. The theft of authority before hundreds of witnesses. Victor raised the ring toward the council. Until His Majesty recovers. The enormous chamber doors suddenly opened. A palace guard hurried inside. He bowed deeply before Captain Rowan. My captain, the prisoner has arrived. The hall murmured with confusion. Sophia frowned almost imperceptibly. What prisoner? Rowan stepped forward. The surviving courier. Victor's expression changed for the first time. Only for an instant. But Emily saw it. Fear. Real fear. The courier was escorted inside in chains. Bruised. Exhausted. Yet still alive. He lifted trembling eyes toward the assembled nobles. Then, without hesitation, he pointed directly across the chamber. At Lord Victor Langley. The hall exploded into shocked whispers. Victor staggered backward. He's lying. Before anyone could answer, the courier slowly raised his shaking arm again. This time, his finger pointed toward Lady Sophia Bennet. Silence crashed over the chamber like thunder. Emily stood motionless among the servants. The trap Alexander had designed weeks earlier had finally closed. Only now, it was no longer the king pretending to be helpless. It was the conspirators discovering they had nowhere left to hide. A kingdom can forgive failure. It rarely forgives betrayal witnessed with its own eyes. Silence held the council chamber together for several long seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. The courier's trembling finger remained pointed toward Lord Victor Langley. Then it shifted, toward Lady Sophia Bennet. The hall erupted. Impossible. He's lying. This is madness. The whispers spread like wildfire across the chamber. Victor stepped forward, his face pale with outrage. This man is a criminal. He'll accuse anyone to save himself. The courier struggled against his chains. I carried your letters. His voice cracked from exhaustion. I delivered your payments. Victor pointed toward Captain Rowan. This confession was forced. Sophia remained astonishingly calm. She lowered her eyes just enough to appear wounded. My king. She turned toward Alexander's motionless figure. I have devoted years of my life to your side. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I cannot defend myself against such cruelty. Many nobles hesitated. Emily understood why. Sophia's performance was flawless. If this had been the only evidence, many would have believed her. Alexander still did not move. Emily quietly looked toward Captain Rowan again. He gave another subtle nod. Not yet. The royal herald suddenly raised his staff. Additional evidence has been requested. The great chamber doors opened once more. 2 palace guards entered carrying a heavy wooden chest secured with iron bands. They placed it directly before the throne. Murmurs swept across the council. Victor frowned. I've never seen that chest. Alexander's voice finally broke the silence. You haven't. The chamber froze. Every noble stared toward the throne. Slowly, deliberately, Alexander removed the blanket covering his legs. Then he stood, without assistance, without hesitation. The sound of dozens of nobles gasping echoed through the chamber. Sophia stepped backward. No. Victor's face drained of all color. Alexander descended the 3 marble steps before his throne with calm, measured strides. Every footstep shattered another piece of the illusion they had trusted. Emily watched the servants around her. Some covered their mouths. Others dropped to one knee instinctively. Alexander stopped beside the iron-bound chest. You wish to know whether your king could still stand. His voice remained steady. Now you have your answer. He placed one hand upon the chest. You also wish to know whether your crimes remained hidden. Captain Rowan unlocked the heavy lid. Inside rested dozens of sealed letters. Royal accounting books. Hidden ledgers. Witness statements. Secret correspondence. Even the poison medicine bottle remained wrapped inside the same white cloth Emily had used days earlier. Alexander lifted the bottle first. This, he held it high for the council to see, was delivered as my medicine. He then displayed the courier's ledger. These payments funded the ambush. Next came treasury records. These accounts financed the conspiracy. Finally, he unfolded the letter bearing Victor's unmistakable signature. The order to eliminate witnesses. Captain Rowan handed copies to the royal judges. Each examined the documents carefully. One by one, their expressions changed from curiosity to disbelief, then horror. Sophia's composure finally cracked. This proves nothing. Alexander turned toward her. No. He looked toward Emily standing quietly among the servants. Then perhaps someone else can explain why my maid repeatedly uncovered every lie before any noble in this room. Hundreds of eyes shifted toward Emily. She froze. She had spent years hoping no one would notice her. Now the entire kingdom was watching. Alexander continued. She noticed the false medicine. She witnessed the secret meetings. She recognized stolen authority before any council member. She remained loyal while those born into privilege betrayed their oaths. Sophia stared at Emily with open hatred. It was her. She whispered. Emily understood at last. Sophia had never feared Alexander's strength. She had feared the quiet servant who kept seeing what everyone else chose to ignore. The Alpha King's deception had exposed the conspirators, but Emily's courage had ensured they could never escape the truth. And before the eyes of the entire royal council, the invisible Maid was invisible no longer. Justice is complete only when the innocent no longer have to lower their eyes. The royal council remained silent as the judges examined every document spread across the long oak table. Each seal was authentic. Each signature matched official records. Each ledger connected another missing piece. No one could dismiss the evidence anymore. The eldest royal judge slowly rose. His voice echoed through the chamber. The evidence is overwhelming. He turned toward Lord Victor. You stand accused of treason. Then toward Lady Sophia. You stand accused of conspiracy against the crown. The words landed like stones. Victor's confidence disappeared. He stepped backward until palace guards blocked his escape. This is political. I served this kingdom for 20 years. No one can believe the word of a servant over mine. His desperate gaze swept across the council. Several nobles lowered their heads. None answered. Sophia remained frighteningly composed, until she looked toward Alexander. So, she whispered, I was never your Luna. Alexander's expression never changed. No, you were someone I intended to marry. He took another slow step forward. But a title is not loyalty. Sophia's voice trembled for the first time. You deceived everyone. Alexander answered calmly. I deceived those already planning to betray me. Captain Rowan stepped beside Victor. In the name of the crown, he removed Victor's ceremonial chain of office. You are under arrest. 2 guards seized Victor's arms. He struggled violently. You need me. The provinces will revolt. Alexander looked directly at him. The kingdom survived before you. It will survive after you. Victor was dragged toward the great doors. His angry shouts slowly disappeared down the corridor. Sophia never resisted. She simply looked at Emily for several long seconds, then smiled sadly. You were only a maid. Emily met her eyes without fear. I still am. Sophia lowered her head. And yet, you defeated all of us. She surrendered her royal pendant before extending both hands. The guards placed iron restraints around her wrists. As she was escorted away, the enormous council chamber remained completely silent. No applause, no celebration, only the quiet weight of truth finally settling over the kingdom. When the doors closed behind the prisoners, Alexander turned toward the assembled nobles. My kingdom was not endangered because my enemies were clever. It was endangered because too many honorable people remained silent. No one dared interrupt him. He continued. A servant spoke. A courier confessed. A captain remained loyal. That is why this kingdom still stands. He then looked toward Emily. She instinctively lowered her eyes. Old habits were difficult to forget. Alexander descended from the throne platform until he stood directly before her. Every noble watched. Every servant held their breath. Emily quietly bowed. My king. Alexander spoke clearly enough for every person inside the chamber to hear. Look at me. She slowly raised her head. For the first time since entering Blackwood Castle years earlier, she met the Alpha King's eyes before the entire royal council. You once saved my life as a child without asking my name. You protected this kingdom again without asking for reward. You remained honest while people far above your station abandoned their honor. He removed the royal wolf crest from inside his coat, the same silver emblem she had protected since childhood. Alexander fastened the leather cord gently around her neck. This belongs with its rightful guardian. The chamber remained perfectly still. Then Alexander raised his voice. Let every noble present remember this day. The woman you overlooked, the maid you ignored, the servant you believed insignificant, became the first person to see through every lie. He extended his hand toward her. From this day forward, no one in Blackwood Castle will question her loyalty. No one will insult her place. She stands under my personal protection. Emily hesitated only a moment before accepting his hand, not as someone seeking power, not as someone chasing a crown, but as the same kind young woman who had once helped an injured stranger during a snowstorm. because it was simply the right thing to do. And throughout the Great Hall, every noble finally understood the lesson they should have learned long before. A kingdom is never saved only by the strongest alpha. Sometimes, it is saved by the quiet courage of the one everyone failed to notice. Some stories end when justice is served. The ones worth remembering begin with the lives rebuilt afterward. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The snow that had once covered Blackwood Castle melted into clear streams flowing beneath the ancient stone bridges. The kingdom breathed differently now, not because its walls had changed, but because fear no longer ruled behind them. The trials of Lord Victor Langley and Lady Sophia Bennet lasted several weeks. Every witness was heard, every ledger examined, every hidden account uncovered. When the final verdict was announced, no one questioned it. Their titles were stripped. Their estates were reclaimed by the crown. The families who had suffered because of their conspiracy finally received justice. Thomas was released without a single charge. The frightened kitchen assistant returned to the castle with tears in his eyes after Alexander publicly cleared his name before the entire household. Captain Rowan resumed command of the royal guard. The loyal soldiers who had secretly protected the king throughout his deception were finally honored for their silence and devotion. Life inside Blackwood Castle slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. Except, nothing was truly the same anymore. Emily still rose before sunrise. She still walked through the quiet kitchens before anyone else. She still greeted every servant by name. She still carried trays herself whenever the kitchens became busy. Many people expected her to abandon those simple routines after receiving the king's public protection. She never did. One morning, Margaret found Emily folding clean table linens exactly as she had years before. "You don't have to do this anymore." Emily smiled gently. "I never did it because I had to. I did it because someone needed to." Margaret laughed softly. "That is exactly why everyone trusts you." Across the castle, something else had quietly changed. Whenever Emily entered a room, servants no longer lowered their voices out of pity. Guards no longer overlooked her presence. Nobles who once ignored her now greeted her with genuine respect. Not because Alexander had ordered them to, because they remembered. They remembered who had seen the truth first. Several days later, Alexander stood alone in the castle gardens where the old fountain still whispered beneath blooming vines. Emily arrived carrying a basket of fresh herbs gathered for the royal healer. She smiled when she saw him. "You came without guards." Alexander looked around the peaceful garden. "I finally can." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable now. No hidden enemies. No secret messages. No dangerous performances. Only honesty. Alexander reached into his coat. He removed the silver wolf crest. The leather cord still rested around Emily's neck, but in his hand lay another object. A new royal insignia, crafted in silver and white gold. "I had this made." Emily accepted it carefully. "What is it?" "A symbol." She looked closer. It combined the royal wolf with a simple woven knot like the ones servants used to tie aprons. Alexander smiled faintly. "So no one forgets where true loyalty was found." Emily laughed quietly. "I think they'll remember. I hope they remember why." He looked toward the castle overlooking the valley. A kingdom survives because ordinary people choose courage, not because kings wear crowns. Emily followed his gaze. The morning sun illuminated Blackwood Castle with warm golden light. For the first time in many years, it looked like a home instead of a fortress. Alexander finally turned toward her. "I spent weeks pretending I couldn't stand." Emily smiled. "And I spent weeks pretending I couldn't see." Both laughed. The sound echoed gently through the quiet garden. Far above them, the royal banner lifted in the spring wind, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder that one humble maid had refused to ignore what everyone else accepted. One alpha king had trusted quiet integrity over appearances. And together, they proved that the strongest kingdom is built not by fear, but by courage, truth, and the simple choice to do what is right when no one else dares.